Hey, thank you, everyone. I'm Pat. This is Rachel.
Hey.
Thank you, Blake. It's interesting to be called to do a TED Talk. When Rachel called me and informed me that we needed to do a TED Talk, I said, "Who's Ted, and what's this all about?" At any rate, I was told it was fantasy, and then I kind of fell right into line. Dragoncon is all about fantasy. How many people have heard of Dragoncon before this morning? Oh, my job's done. Up to you. Well, no. I have an interesting resume. Blake told you most of it. I've been reading comics since I was a child. Back then, you subscribed to comics back in the 60s. And comics were delivered in a brown paper wrapper with your name on it, kind of like it was some sort of pornography. Comics were not as well thought of in the 60s. Now, you know, comics, graphic novels, there's been Pulitzers given to them. It's a whole different world, and thank God for that. At any rate, I started playing role-playing games in the beginning, and I still play some games. I play Clash of Clans and Forge of Empires with my grandchild. So at any rate, I think my father would have a stroke about my resume. But you know what? I do have a college degree, and it does work. You can read comics and graduate. So, at any rate, so I'm in business. I'm going to talk about the origin. I do the origin story. We take fantasy back to the days of cavemen, where cavemen and cavewomen would get around the campfire and talk about various beasts they had slain or had whatever they had done, and fantasy kind of began there. And then at some point, I'm sure love stories came in, which got into real fantasy. And then the word became kind of carried around by groups, bards, whatever, and stories. And eventually they were written down, the Iliad, the Odyssey, Gilgamesh, a number of heroes. And from writing, we went to plays and operas, and eventually we hit movies, silent movies, and then to talkies, and then to television. So fantasy has come a long way in the years that we've been on this earth. In 1939, July 4th weekend, a group of individuals got together and decided to have a World Science Fiction Convention, which was a gathering of people that love science fiction and fantasy. It was interesting in that you take science fiction readers and comic book readers, and we're not exactly known as the most social group in the world. So this is a social gathering of antisocial people. Interesting, no? At any rate, in 1939, they got together to talk about science fiction and fantasy, and to argue about science fiction and fantasy and decide what was good about science fiction and fantasy. At any rate, that brings me to Dragoncon. 30 years ago, a bunch of us got together, and we wanted to do an event that we would attend. Conventions back then were either, if you were a comic guy, you went to a comic convention. If you were a Star Trek guy, you went to a Star Trek convention. If you were a Doctor Who fan, you went to a Who convention. And if you were a science fiction fan, you went to a science fiction convention. What we decided is, since a lot of us were gamers, as I was, and a comic book reader, and science fiction and horror, Lovecraft, Heinlein, we should put it all together into one event. And we did so. And so in doing that, we brought together comic collectors, and we had 1,200 fans for our first event. And we found it around fan programming, costuming, music, and fun. And from that, we've grown to 30 different tracks, adding and subtracting as fans liked. and the rest we say is history. Now, there's one other thing that we did, or actually we fell into, is we were located in Atlanta, Georgia. And in Atlanta, Georgia, we have wonderful universities here. We have Georgia Tech, we have Georgia State, we have SCADS here now, we have Atlanta Art Institute, we have, in addition to the schools, we have an incredibly creative environment. We have CreativeMornings for 5 years, and an incredible tolerance in this city. I come from a nerd background. Nobody knew I read comic books in high school. That was not the thing to do. Here in Atlanta, because of the tolerance, I can let people know that I not only read comics, I read science fiction, and I can dress up, and I get into a very tolerant group. I look to leaders like Dr. King, Ambassador Young, and Jimmy Carter, coming from this area, that has helped with the tolerance of Atlanta. So we have creativity, we have leadership, inclusiveness, and of course Southern hospitality here. Sounds like a perfect place to start the greatest fan convention in the world.
Okay, so still unsure why we're here? Well, let me take you on a little adventure. We're all travelers from another planet. You can be anybody or anything that you want. You can be any color, say purple, blue, green, yellow, rainbow, and yes, my 6-year-old daughter does insist that rainbow is indeed a real color. Maybe you're from the future. Maybe you're from the past. Maybe you want to be a character from a favorite book or television show. Now, if you're open to be somebody else, why not be somebody really, really great, like Batman? Or somebody really, really bad, like Harley Quinn? What's the old saying? Good girls go to heaven and bad girls go everywhere? Doesn't sound so bad, now does it? Or you can be something totally and completely original. Whatever you want, it's great, just so long as you are not you. Now, we need a way to get around. Maybe a spaceship or a dragon. How about a time machine? Or maybe we just want to materialize anywhere we go. Are you ready? Great. I'll set the destination. We're headed to the planet Earth, Atlanta, Georgia to be exact, on Labor Day weekend. And when you arrive, you see a sign welcoming you to Dragoncon. Isn't that curious? Now, what do you think somebody from another planet would think of Dragoncon? Well, let's start out first with what they'd see. Strictly speaking, Dragoncon is a 4-day convention for people who love science fiction, fantasy, and all things pop culture. We hold the event in downtown Atlanta in the 5 host hotels in America's Mart every Labor Day weekend. But the first thing they're gonna notice, the first thing they'll notice are the huge crowds of people. This past year, we welcomed 77,000 people to our event. Now, in comparison, to give you a little reference, the capacity of the Georgia Dome for a football game is actually only 75,000. So fans joined us from every state in the nation and all around the world. People came from Canada, several European nations, countries across the Pacific Rim. Now, over the next 4 days, these people are going to come, enjoy visiting with the people behind some of the things they love, the creative minds behind the movies, the television shows. Usually we have about 400 actors, authors, artists, game designers, puppeteers, you name it, all sorts of experts who have come to talk about the television shows they've worked on, maybe the books they've written, or whatever else happens to be in their field of expertise. And the next thing you'll notice are the costumes, my favorite, the wonderful, wonderful costumes. Now, not everybody wears a costume, and not everybody wears a costume all the time, but a lot of people do. And some people have, no kidding, been known to bring dozens of costumes. Costumes for every day, one for every night, perhaps even a costume contest in there, and then some extras in case they change their mind. Now, for some, cosplay is a sort of expression of love. Now, cosplay is a combination of costume and play, for those that don't know it. It's an expression of love. Love for a favorite character, a love for a favorite movie. And now you can usually tell these. They're typically perfect replicas, really amazing. They pay attention to every detail. Others see costuming as a chance to just make something really, really cool. It offers them a construction challenge. Might not be a character they like, or heck, it may not even be a character at all. Perhaps they just want to figure out how to wire LED lighting through their costume, or maybe make their wings work. And then we have some with an amazing sense of humor. I think these are some of my favorite throughout the event to spot, is the people that are just fun. Now, cosplay is as much a part of Dragoncon as meeting the guests. Much of the fantasy world that exists for us exists in large part because of the creative minds of our fans. If they can dream it, you will see it at Dragoncon. Now, you can come join us on Wednesday in any of the hotel lobbies and see hordes of people checking in with boxes upon boxes of costume pieces. You'll see lawyers, doctors, students, artists, musicians, engineers, truly people from all walks of life. And this is a really cool thing about fantasy. Fantasy brings people together from all sorts of backgrounds, and it unites them. And let's be honest, couldn't we all use a little bit more unity today? So the next question you, our visiting spaceman, might ask is, what is there to do at Dragoncon? The answer, anything you want to, really. After meeting with your favorite celebrities or showing off your new costume, there's over 3,500 hours of programming. You can literally just sit around and talk about the things you love. You can do things like build a robot or a puppet. You can even learn how to do Hollywood-style special effects makeup. You can maybe work on a novel with an author or attend an art class with a professional artist. You can even extract DNA from a strawberry or observe the sun with special telescopes. Let's see, if you're a gamer, you could play a game, or 100. You can see a show, you can see professional wrestling and robot battles, and so much more. So, okay, I think we're good. Everybody know what Dragoncon is at this point? Right, good. So now the next question, probably the most important one, is why? Why on earth do people take a week off, travel all the way to Atlanta from all parts of the world to just join in? Well, this is where the real fantasy comes in. Coming to Dragoncon is kind of giving yourself permission to step off the planet for a few days and be anybody you want to be. And it's okay. In fact, it's encouraged. Dragoncon is a chance to be a kid again. We get an opportunity to believe in the impossible, or at least not possible now, for a few days. Now, Dragoncon is a sort of home to our fans. Whoever you are, whoever you want to be, and whatever geeky thing you're into, you can find it at Dragoncon. And even cooler, you can find a home at Dragoncon. Now, science fiction fans mingle with scientists, ghost hunters hang out with the skeptics, and every hero and villain shares space. Dragoncon fans come to, say, catch up with friends they only see once a year, or perhaps meet new friends with similar backgrounds. And this is the secret behind fandom, the community that's there. And the inclusiveness of our fans is unparalleled. It is what allows people to come to our event and be in whatever skin they want to be in that fantasy world. So, okay, let's think. Let me tell you, this is a good story. It's my favorite story to have come out of Dragoncon this past year. It's about a cosplayer, a full-time student named Charles Conley. He arrived at Dragoncon with a phenomenal Batman costume. I can't even go into how incredibly spot on his armor was, how impeccably confident his walk was, and how he was able to embody both the power and pain of that character. Well, okay, if you've ever been to Dragoncon, you're probably going to see 20 plus Batmans a day, and that's conservative. But Charles stood out because he chose to embrace the character despite the fact that his skin color didn't match the traditional Batman. And in doing so, he challenged the perception people had of the character. And he made a huge difference in the life of a little boy A little boy that didn't understand that fantasy, that dreams, didn't have to have limitations. He told the boy, you can be any superhero you want to be. Don't let anybody ever tell you any differently. It had a profound effect on both that little boy as well as, obviously, the Batman. Now, why should fantasy only exist in a city as great as Atlanta for 4 days a year? The simple answer is that it shouldn't. Our message today is very similar to that of our unique Batman. By allowing a little fantasy into your life, you can do great things. You can be and do anything you want to be. You can challenge the expectations of others in the community. You can also just create great things. If you think about it, several of the best inventions of our time, were actually dreamed up long before by the creative minds behind some of the science fiction and fantasy that we're able to enjoy. Do we have any Star Trek fans out there? Wow. No, okay, cool. Well, we could probably honestly do a whole lecture on Star Trek and the technologies they had that have come to fruition and that we're able to enjoy today. But because I'm hungry, we're going to focus on my favorite, which is the replicator. So the replicator in Star Trek was able to basically materialize any food or drink and several other things just at the simple voice command. Clearly impossible, right? I mean, that's crazy. Well, wrong. Today, we have 3D printers that do virtually the same thing. Now, I'll be honest, we've got a ways to go before it's as flawless and easy for those on board the Enterprise, but I mean, look at it. They've printed a pizza, and the opportunities are endless. Anybody wearing an Apple Watch today? Okay. So, Apple Watch, I mean, such a cool technology, brings kind of everything to literally your fingertips, right? And it's an ingenious creation by Apple, but the concept was dreamed up long before. Meet Dick Tracy, one of the best loved and best known and most beloved detectives ever. Now, one of the most iconic pieces of his wardrobe was his two-way wrist radio, right? It appeared back in 1946, which kind of seems crazy today. It's just not cooperating. But it morphed through the years and added different functions along the way, and then ultimately became a two-way television where he was able to see the people that he was talking to. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And then we have drone technology. Drone technology appeared in a 1957 issue of Batman titled The 1001 Inventions of Batman. In it, the villain steals one of his inventions and duplicates it, sending our Caped Crusaders on a mission to figure out which one. Ultimately, it was the Flying Eye, which was a drone that would take pictures and send them back to Batman so that he could kind of keep an eye on what was going on in the city. Now, I do understand that technology has come a far, far way, but in 1957, that was an extremely futuristic concept. And you know, we could go on and on. There's HAL from a 2001 A Space Odyssey, clear predecessor to Siri. There's the fancy hoverboards from Back to the Future. I've no kidding seen my niece empty an entire dishwasher on her hoverboard. Seriously. And my personal favorite, the Roomba, as my husband would proudly tell you, because I have one everywhere I can have one, but appearing in Jetsons way before ever coming to a living room near us. Now, so practically every great thing started, even if not in science fiction and fantasy, it began in a fantastically creative mind, much like the ones that we have in this room today. So today, we challenge you. We challenge you to dream big, to not allow limitations on those dreams, and we challenge you to allow yourself to live in a fantasy world. Because after all, fantasy is fun. Fantasy is freedom. Fantasy gives us something to aspire to, something to work towards. And fantasy today is actually reality tomorrow. Now, this is your universe. So what are you guys going to make it? That's it.
Hello. Thanks, Rachel and Pat. We're going to do a Q&A. Let's give them another round of applause for sharing. Thank you. All right. Y'all share that mic. If you have a question, raise your hand, and they'll call on you. I'll start off question off to get the crowd going. Maybe talk about your strategy, your thinking on how to build community, since that's like the key. How do you do that?
How to build community. There's so much. It's funny because if you ask Pat, he's going to have a totally different answer than I do. Because now I oversee the communications of Dragoncon, and so I've seen a real increase. If we talk about from the beginning, community in general, community is acceptance. That's the core root of what it is. So quite frankly, if you come to Dragoncon, and we kind of fell into that. It's people that are like-minded, coming together, accepting whatever they want to be. We have a very peaceful group. I would love to take credit for it, but we can't. Or I could if nobody's in the room that knows better. But for instance, like when we have Dragoncon, we get a lot of questions about, it's a huge crowd, how do you manage it, how many bad things occur, like altercations, and truly, in our history, never has an altercation occurred that didn't have somebody from outside of Dragoncon. The people that are there are already a community of sorts. And in today's environment, the best thing we've done is social media is a huge part of how we keep that community going. We do year-round events and things like that. So in this day and time, it's a bit differently.
It's mainly creating a community of acceptance and tolerance. I think you guys all know now I'm a comic guy, comic geek. At Dragoncon, I can go and I can talk and start a friendly argument with somebody about who would win a fight, Hulk or Thor. And everybody knows that while Thor's the god and has the hammer, Hulk gets stronger the madder he gets. So there's no beating Hulk, right? At any rate, these things become a friendly, and that's the way the Dragoncon is. And we perpetuate that it's A-okay to have differing opinions and feel free to stress them. But it is an accepting and tolerant community. Any other questions?
Hey guys. So every year Dragoncon expands more and more. How do you keep the essence of what makes Dragoncon while still adding more tracks to it?
We listen to our fans. We pay attention to pop culture. We're all ourselves geeks and nerds, so we pay attention to what's going on. We know about Game of Thrones. We know about Harley Quinn, Deadpool, Stranger Things this year. But we do pay attention to what's going on, and we do what we want to see too.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is we get that question as far as how does it continually grow. We've seen consistent growth since 2001. And honestly, the secret is just staying tapped in. And like he says, kind of listening to people. And then also just creating, it goes back to why they created Dragoncon, creating an event that we all one day wish to attend. And we kind of feel like as long as there's value there for the fans, we're very careful strategically when you look at some of the things that are out there in our industry and making decisions about whether we'll incorporate them or not. And our primary thing that we follow is it good for the fans?
And the only other thing I can add is sometimes when Rachel and I are talking about things, I'll bring something up or she'll bring something up, is it fun? Is it cool? And we can do it. So we really do fun well, and we do try to get out of the box, and because it's never been done before, it means nothing to us. That's just noise. So we like to do things. The whole Dragoncon parade thing. We came up with that. I was walking with a guy I was in business with on Peachtree, and actually the Salvation Army was coming down Peachtree with a parade, and we both looked at each other and started laughing and said, we could do that. And Dragoncon, we are a parading people. We're just not a very physically fit people. So we have to keep the parade at a certain... I mean, And so that's kind of the way the whole thing works. I mean, we are who we are, and let's base that with, I mean, in fantasy, but let's throw a little reality in there. We don't want to kill people. So, anybody else? You got one, Blake?
Yeah, over here.
So I have a two-part question. First, I'd like to thank you guys for coming down because Dragoncon is like my favorite thing to do, hands down. It's like my Christmas. It's a vacation for me. So anybody who hasn't gone to Dragoncon, make sure you go. It's incredible to see. But my first question is, since its inception back in the 80s, at what point did you have the feeling like, whoa, this is massive? Going from 1,500 people to 70,000 people over the course of, 30 years. At what point were you like, this is insane?
It was 2000. In 2000, we actually had less than 5,000 people. I don't care what the history says, I'm telling the truth. So we had less than 5,000 people. But at that point in time, my wife and I were forced to the front of it, and we were breaking. We had given blood, sweat, and tears, and we were ready to either step away or not. And so at that point in time, we got less run by committee and more run by business. And we stepped up. She took over the back end, which I had done, the business end of it, and I took over the guest end. And we had actually made a commitment to sell an awful lot of hotel rooms, and there was no way. So she and I went on the road. And anywhere as many as 200 or 300 of our people, I refer to that as genre people. You guys may refer to them as nerds and geeks. But at any rate, that they're my people. At any rate, wherever, and we would go there, and we would, in addition to selling Dragoncon and telling them what we're doing and who we are, we also handed out hotel brochures to sell rooms. And it actually worked. We made the room commitment in 2001, and from then on, it's just been insane. But like it's all formed. We're there too, and we want to have a good time.
And my second question is, do you all plan on keeping the location the same going forward?
Depending on who holds the microphone, you might get a different answer. So I'm going to let him break. One of the secrets behind Dragoncon's success is where we are. It is the southern hospitality of the people around us, but also the hospitality industry. The hotels have been amazing, amazing partners. And so quite frankly, we want to stay in a similar footprint. We have a lot of growth opportunity, however. If you said you attended the event, we've moved over to America's Mart now, building 1 and 2 successfully. There's still more space in building 2, as well as a building 3. That still keeps our similar footprint. So I gotta say, I know a lot of people ask it, and you get very differing opinions on going to the World Congress Center, but quite frankly, it would change who we are. And so if at a point that occurs, which I'm not gonna say it will never, I can say that I personally will go kicking and screaming. So, and now probably for the more professional answer, one moment.
Actually, I'm going to give you the geeky answer. I prefer not to be more than, say, 150 feet from a bar. Okay? I admit that I am somewhat socially retarded, and that's okay for me. There's nothing quite like a little wine or a little beer that just relaxes me and just gets me more ready to argue that point about Hulk's number 1.
All right, we've got time for one more. If anyone else has a question? Okay.
Hi. So this Dragoncon was my 13th, and so I've been going for a long time, and I've noticed that you guys have managed to overcome a lot of challenges, like the registration challenge, I think in 2012, whenever it was, and some other ones like space, right? So what do you see as your biggest challenges moving forward?
Well, again, probably have different answers. For me, the biggest challenge is, quite frankly, staying on top of the ever-changing technology and just things out there. It is coming at us so fast that it does present a challenge. It's a fun challenge, and it's something that we're going to hopefully rise to. And that applies to everything, technology, even the shows. Like now, Netflix is a huge player in the game that you would never have seen a year ago. So for me, that's a challenge. A lot of the logistics we've gotten done, one of my biggest ones, had you asked me last year, was lines for programming. But this year, we, quite frankly, could have had a better time, but overall really hit it out of the ballpark by making some adjustments. So listening to our fans and figuring out what's needed to change and responding to it is how we always will. But for me, the just fast pace, I mean, today is so different than years ago where literally it's a new thing every morning you wake up.
I'm not as forward thinking as she is. I do this 1 year at a time. So basically, we know that we are, I mean, 77,000 people is a lot of folks. And we know we're going to make some mistakes, like you mentioned registration. We're going to make them. But I also feel that we're a very creative people, and we can find something new and different to screw up next year. But we're going to, by God, fix that which we screwed up this year. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Let's give them one more round of applause. I just want to say, too, that, hold on, Pat, Rachel, 1 second before you leave. I just want to say thank you from just a member of the city of Atlanta for Pat having a vision to do this and the resolve and the perseverance to figure it out and to keep fighting, and for Rachel, for you to come in and support your father in that and to keep it going forward, because it's a huge thing for the city of Atlanta. It puts us on the map in a big way, so thank you.